Welcome to Breaking Lines with Matt Smith. We're joined by one of the most prolific strikers in the English game over the last God knows how long, and he's wrecked many a defence. Matt, it's great to be joined by you this morning. How are you?
Dave, I'm good. Thank you for having me on. Glad to be here.
Now, Matt, you're known as one of the most intelligent players in the game, but I have to say, maybe your most intelligent decision recently is missing preseason this year. How does that stack up on the decisions you've had?
Very, very high. Very, very high. I haven't missed it one bit, I can tell you. But no, it's been strange. It's the first time in my career I've been a free agent, and the first time I've ever not been somewhere on a day one. As much as I hate day one with the 1500 meters or whatever, the yo-yo test or whatever you intend on doing. But it's been a strange feeling. But I've been just sitting back and watching the other lads talking about it, which has been refreshing.
Be honest, Matt. How many group chats are you in, and how smug do you feel when all the other lads are sticking stuff on? Like, I had a horrific session. You say, "Oh, funny! I'm on my third coffee of the day. I'm just chilling
Exactly.
out, lads."
Exactly. Well, I got booted out of the Salford group chat within like a minute of not re-signing my contract. So the lads were like, "Cheers, Smudge, see ya," and then kicked me out.
Ruthless.
Yeah, ruthless. But yeah, no, I've been speaking to loads of the boys, and it's all the same, isn't it? Just like generally just being shattered every day, not having a lot of energy, bodies in bits. But I think now you know what it's like when you get to sort of the last week or two. And the games are starting to come a bit thicker and faster, and you're kind of approaching the season is a little bit easier, isn't it? Apparently the first couple of weeks, but I think at Salford were particularly tough. So yeah, no, I'm glad to be just watching from afar.
Matt, you've obviously had a long career, quite a few clubs. Is there any of those pre-seasons and any of those clubs that particularly stick out as being particularly brutal? You can obviously leave our ones out because obviously they were the worst.
Can I be honest? I don't think I've ever had a horrendous one. You know, when you hear like of the Tony Pulis one type ones, or I don't think I've ever had a horrific one. When I was at Leeds, we had Dave Hockaday who took us for a pre-season. I don't remember that era under the like Massimo Cellino era. That was tough in the sense that it was 3 sessions a day every single day, more or less. Maybe double session was kind of like a rest day. That was probably 10 days in like a remote part of northern Italy. That was probably as tough as I've had. But you know what? I've had some okay ones. A lot of the stories I hear of other teams who've done this, we've done that, and you know what it's like in modern day football. It's approached a little bit differently. The balls are out a lot sooner from the get go, really. But I think I've avoided like the historically awful ones.
Do you know why that
Thank
is?
God. Thank
Do,
God.
do you know why that is, Matt? Because sports science basically ruined it. They came
People
into
like
the
Dave.
game around the same time as you started, and there'd be someone
Exactly.
like Dave over my shoulder saying, "Oh, you need to think about the training load. This is getting a little bit too high."
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I'd be so shut up, Dave. Come on.
Ten,
But
10 minutes
yeah,
in, I get into the red zone and Dave pulls me out, so it's okay.
No
there you
chance. Nobody's
go.
getting
Yeah.
pulled out.
How much did that cost? Yeah. No, but
Yeah,
Matt,
yeah,
going back to your early days, obviously you started you started sort of slightly less conventionally to a lot of players in the league now, where you had that non-league sort of upbringing, and you not jumped around, but you had quite a few different clubs. At what point, when you were playing there, was that just a love for the game? Was that trying to make
yeah.
your way in professional football? Was that what sort of started that really?
That was pure love for the game. I think for me, when I was at Cheltenham as a YT, I never for a million years thought I'd get an offer to pro. I think like all of the team, bar the goalkeeper, got released, so I knew that was going to happen, and I kind of had university kind of ready for me to go into. I knew that was kind of my path. I never really back then there was no 23s. It was like reserve team football. I never really got a sniff at that. So I knew what the writing was on the wall at Cheltenham. Didn't have a lot of resource as a club. I don't think they had, you know, the the resource to take loads of young lads through. It was kind of they were handpicking one or two of the good ones. But I knew that my fate lied sort of going down that university path, and just did it purely enjoyment. I think for me it was a big social thing at university. Is obviously, meeting new lads when you first come there as like a fresher, meeting new lads and getting that social. That was kind of all my social scene was initially derived through football, pure enjoyment. And then it was my university coach who was also the Man United under 14s coach at the time, and he sort of could see a bit of something. I mean, he kind of put me in with some local non-league sides. I think they were right down the pyramid, like Northwest Counties League. So I enjoyed that, and it was a bit of pocket money as well, which when you're a student and a night out costs 20 quid. 150 quid a week seems like it seems like I was raking an absolute fortune. But
the shots are on you.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So yeah, and then that kind of spiraled. Really, the non-league scene was where I kind of really did my growing up, and kind of rose through the non-league ranks as my university kept going. So by the time I got to my final year, my fourth year, I was playing in the Conference North, which at the time, I mean, there's a few full-time teams in the Conference North now, but at that time it was the highest level of part-time football. And I just happened, pure luck and timing, had a great season in my final year. I scored like 30-odd goals or something for Redditch and Solihull Moors, half and half. And then Paul Dickhoff took a punt on me. So never in my wildest dreams did I think that would happen. Like December pre-meeting Paul in a Frankie and Benny's in Didsbury, I was like interviewing for jobs in London, trying to get on a graduate scheme in the city. Very much thought that was where I was destined to go. And then, when I met him and he offered me a 2-year deal at Oldham, I was like, bloody hell, this has taken a wild U-turn. So it's, very grateful to him, I think.
So nowhere in these early initiation ceremonies in your freshers year are you thinking, right, I'm going to end up at Oldham in a few years and start banging goals in?
If I showed you some photos of my physique back then, there was absolutely no way you would have thought I was destined to play any level of professional sport. That's for sure.
So what was the career path then if it wasn't going to be football? If the Olden thing hadn't happened, where would Matt Smith have been? Would we see you now as like Chancellor of the Exchequer or something like that?
I don't think, no, definitely not. I don't think so. I mean, I was interviewing for like management consultancy roles. I did a pretty generic business degree, so I think I was looking for some sort of generic-ish graduate scheme to get me down in London and get me kind of on the sort of like corporate ladder, but there was no real like specific funnel I was looking towards at the time. It was just kind of doing what my peers were doing, that all my mates were doing, which was applying for the Accentures and the Bain and McKinseys of this world and hoping for the best. So I was doing a few of those interviews. Didn't get very far, I don't think, in any of them, but I made the interview process. I don't think I actually passed any of them, but that was kind of what I was doing at the time.
Was there ever a point, Matt, where maybe at Oldham where you scored some really important goals, some big sort of cup games, and you sort of rose, I suppose, had a lot more exposure perhaps in some of those games, but was there a sort of point where you thought, I think I've got a real chance at this, like, I could really get somewhere, or was it always just playing for the love and not really thinking too much? How did you feel at that point?
I think up until it was weird, my time at Oldham, really, because obviously everyone will think of it as like a really successful spell, and the goals against Liverpool and Everton, and got my move to Leeds, but 3/4 of that time was pretty average, if I'm being honest with you. The first 18 months, I really struggled. I got that was back in the day when you could do the sort of 93-day loan. I had a sort of 6-week spell with Macclesfield in League Two. I started maybe 3, 4, 5 games, maybe coming off the bench all the time for sort of 20 minutes. But I wouldn't say I was having a lot of impact, or I found the transition really, really tough, physically and mentally. I think when it then becomes sort of like your full-time job, for want of a better word, you take things a lot more personally, a lot more seriously, and it kind of I've found balancing the highs and the lows really, really tough at the beginning. And then I have absolutely no idea what happened, but the last 6 months of that my time at Oldham, when I was sort of coming into the latter part of my contract, I just gathered some confidence and momentum out of nowhere. Like, honestly, God, I was driving to that Liverpool game on the Saturday and just not hoping we didn't get beat 5-0. Got 2-1, and then from that moment, I don't know, it just all clicked, I guess. And then, like I said, goals in the next round. Obviously, then you get a bit of publicity, or for want of a better expression, and that built confidence and ended up getting a League One Player of the Month and built a bit of momentum and scored a few goals in the league. And then I'm out of contract, and I've got a few takers in the Championship. So it was really, really strange.
Well, yes, international recognition from the goals against. There's not many people who scored goals against Liverpool and Everton in one season, but you're one of the few people who've actually done that.
Yeah, I mean, for the life of me, I don't know how. I'll be honest with you. It's like I said, if you'd have seen my sort of like 18 months prior, you wouldn't have thought that was possible. But yeah, literally, Lady Luck was looking down on me that day for sure. And then, like anything in sport, you get confidence, momentum. I think I suffered with a lot of like imposter syndrome, certainly for the first 18 months. Did I belong there? Never played full-time football before. So there was kind of a lot of that in the initial stages. But do you know what? I think the one thing that was Paul Dickov always stuck by me and saw something unique or special in me, and he would always bring me on. Like even if I wasn't starting, he'd always bring me on, and he always would do extra sessions with me, be it finishing. But he really took like special attention to me, which now looking back, I actually think bloody hell, like I didn't give him much reason to when I look back on the performances, maybe for the first 18 months. But then, yeah, obviously the last 6 months was just such a contrast to what I'd done before.
I think as a manager, sometimes, obviously, you're speaking about Paul, and I know Paul quite well. I suppose as a manager, sometimes, you see different things to perhaps a player sees, don't you?
Yeah.
So you spoke about it where maybe you didn't believe in yourself enough, or maybe you just, maybe that's just a humility part of your character, but because you come through that sort of lower level. But maybe someone like Paul, as an ex centre forward, a very different one, but maybe he saw different things. He saw your mentality. He saw your character. Do you know what I mean? He saw a real skill set in different areas. So I suppose there's two sides to that, isn't there? You're always going to view it from your position, but from his perspective, maybe you actually did show a lot more than you feel. You just haven't transferred it onto the pitch.
And I'm sure you, as a manager, Gaffer, you would have seen players that you would have spotted things in them that other people wouldn't have seen. And I guess that's the sign of a good manager, isn't it? The ability to spot talent and uncover diamonds in the rough, so to speak. So yeah, it's I was always grateful to him for that. And then obviously then Brian McDermott for making me his first summer signing at Leeds as a free agent, going into that window straight through the door in at Leeds. Like again, like I was so unbelievably grateful and grateful to him so for taking that chance on me. So yeah, I think that whole period of transitioning from non-league to Leeds, that whole time was a lot of learning, understanding. Kind of, there was a lot of development going on that time for sure.
And the transition from being at Macclesfield and having a 93-day loan there, or however long that lasted, and now you're at Elland Road and there's like 40,000 fans. Great when they're on your side and they're supporting you, but that must have been absolute whirlwind to have to mentally cope with it. Like the football will probably take care of itself, but just the psychological effect of having the pressure of all of those fans.
For sure, yeah. I don't think you really, especially for me, I don't think I really understood how big the club was until I got there. And then, you go to even the pre-season games, I'm like, wowzers, like the amount of fans coming across to them, and just to coming away with you on your trip, and you got huge support coming in the thousands to I think we went to Slovenia or something for the first camp. So yeah, incredible club. Absolutely loved my time there. Didn't want to leave at the time. And I didn't want to leave a year later when I did leave to Fulham. That wasn't sort of on the cards. But yeah, great club. But like you say, ferocious fan base. If they're on your side, brilliant. I was lucky enough to have them on my side because I had a really good first season there. But have seen the flip side where if they get on your back, it can be intimidating force to reckon with for sure.
Leeds to Fulham is quite a different change, isn't it? When you think of the extremes of the club, and you think of different clubs competing at similar levels, however, culturally feel polar opposites in some ways. What was Fulham like? Not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. Because living in London, we've all experienced it. It's such an amazing city. Did that have what was that like for you?
I don't think there's a nicer club to play for than Fulham. In sense that the fan base are great. You get your 25,000 through the gate every week, but it's quite an easy club to play for in that sense. There's no they're not massively getting on your back with bad performances like you would have had at Leeds. They generally support the team. You know, I run down, like if I was warming up, I'd look at the immediate crowd and the first few rows, and at Leeds they were like absolute fanatics, whereas I think most of the Fulham lot were like in their suits, coming just back from the city, probably come from
Louis
work with
Vuitton bags.
yeah, you know, they're in their suit. They've just come back from work. They've got their iPhones or their Blackberries out at the time, bloody, you know, doing work emails or something before kickoff. But it's very different atmosphere. But no, I loved it. It's a real, Craven Cottage has got real magic about it. Like definitely one of my favourite stadiums in the country, and lovely place to play. Obviously training grounds and like lovely, you know, quaint Surrey setting. It's like, and then you can live in London, which I did. I was dived right into Fulham and loved that. So yeah, as clubs go, I don't think you can wish for much of a nicer kind of atmosphere and feel to it for sure.
Yeah, from Elland Road to the King's Road, it was a pretty vast kind of change of experience, and of course, London was kind of then your home, wasn't it, for quite a number of years, bar of course, you know, a short spell over at Bristol.
Yeah.
What was it about London in particular? Is there a reason why you ended up staying there for so long? Is it just how the cookie crumbles, or was that part of the plan?
No, it was kind of how the cookie crumbled. Obviously, like, you know, like I always wanted to stay in London, so it was a real added bonus that I did stay in London for sure. But no, after my, I think 18 months there, I was meant 18 months to maybe after 2 years there, I was meant to go to Wolves. I'd agreed personal terms with Wolves. I was meant to go on a swap deal with Kev McDonald, and I'd spoke with Kenny Jackett. I'd agreed the deal and everything, and but then Kenny got the sack, so my deal kind of got off the table, and then Kev ended up going by himself down to Fulham. So I was meant to leave at one point, but that never happened. And then fast forward a few years later, obviously I'm going to QPR, which is literally like down the road. So it was, it was literally just.
Did you get a relocation when you had to move?
Unfortunately not. There was, I kind of went, instead of 20 minutes to Surrey, I was 20 minutes to Heathrow, and then the stadium was a kick just down the road for me. So yeah, it worked out very well, and I loved QPR too. Great people. Again, a real magic about Loftus Road. I always like playing there. The fans are on you. Like, it's quite a compact stadium. So yeah, I got very lucky. It's like I like to refer to myself as the poor man Scott Parker, doing the rounds of the London clubs.
Poor man Scott Parker's still pretty wealthy.
Yes. Yeah. No, I don't know about that. I'm definitely nowhere near.
We'll come on to that in
a minute. So yeah, no, I enjoyed doing the merry-go-round in London for sure, and then coming to Millwall, you guys obviously know, like, great club for so many reasons. And I kind of had like a real false, I think, until you'll understand, when you go to Millwall, you kind of have a pretense of what the place is going to be like, or a feel, and it was totally not that. I'm going to be honest with you. It had a real family feel when I was in the building, underpinned by some really good people. Obviously no less than John. Obviously tragic what's happened to him, but yeah, just really good people in the place, and it definitely was not what I imagined going in, I'm going to be honest with you. But no, I had a great time.
I was the same, Matt. I think I'd agreed to join, and I've been out of the game for sort of 9 months. So I had a specific remit of what I wanted with my next club. I wanted a club to really know what they were. And I remember driving down there, and I'd signed my deal, and I turned up at the training ground, and I've got to be really honest. As soon as I drove through, I thought, what have I done? I thought I'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. And, with all the thing around Millwall, it just felt, what is going on? So, and then I walked into a training ground, and genuinely, within about 10 minutes of being there, I just realised the people just brought the place to life.
Correct.
You walk in and you speak to the cleaner, and you walk in, you speak to Dino, the chef, and you just speak to, and you think no one's complaining, everyone's happy, and it just felt such a vibrant atmosphere in there, in such a poor training ground. So it was it had a strange feeling, didn't it, of a club? But it's a great club to be part of. I'm going to take you back to that moment, Matt. 6th of March, 2020. You just pinched a goal to secure your hat trick, I think, off poor Jason Malumbi. The less said about the better. He was scrapping the other week. I don't know what that
Oh no,
clip
bloody
was.
hell!
What's he doing?
I saw that as
I know,
I
it's
saw
like
that as
Beware
well.
of the fighting Irish. That's all I'll say. The fighting
I know.
Irish.
I know. So, how close do you think we were? How close do you think that Millwall team was? Because we were on a real roll, weren't we, just before COVID hit?
Yeah, I personally think we would have got there. I think the one thing, even if you look at that game, specifically the away game at the City Ground, if you look at the games prior, and then you look at how we dealt with COVID, it was like the one thing we really missed was the fans. That couldn't have been more evident, especially, at home, the Den. I think we were on the cusp of doing something really special that season, and it was such a shame that our momentum, we lost a bit of that going into that sort of bizarre COVID time with the no fans and the weird training and all the rest of it. I think I really do believe, and looking back, and you have time to reflect, that we were there or thereabouts to mount that playoff charge, which was a big shame, because I think going into it, like, if we'd have had that momentum, who knows what could have happened. I think the squad was equipped to challenge it for sure. So yeah, it was such a shame, really, because then I think the kind of wind in our sails was rocked a bit by obviously the big break, and then coming back to like a really bizarre times. So that was a real shame, really, because I thought it was a real good opportunity for us to do something special that year.
And people don't realise that COVID period. If you remember it, Dave, I mean, it was so bizarre, wasn't it? We were allowed to do a 1-to-1 session with a player. You couldn't have different people in the training ground, could you? So it was almost like one in, one out. I remember one day, I remember speaking to Adam about it, because I did the first couple of days, and Adam did the second couple of days. And I after the first couple of days, I said to Ad, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I worked out, I've done something like 20. Honestly, I've done something like 25,000 steps or something crazy, because we were having. I'd take you for 45 minutes, and it would there was something good about the sessions in certain ways, because actually, from a one-to-one individual development, technical, those sessions actually really should have replicated them a lot more, during the season. But it was such a strange time, wasn't it? Those training sessions.
It was such a strange time, and it's laughable looking back now to think what we actually did, with the group Zooms and like bloody squatting in my back garden, and like the Peloton and all the sessions that you're meant to do, record and everything. I think Strava was like must have been the most used app in football at the time. Crazy. And then you come back, and then I remember having that debate of whether or not we put simulated crowd noise on at the Den, or do we play in silence, and then the Derby game when you had all those cardboard cutouts in the crowd, and I thought, what is going on here? Like, just, we remember we get changed in like the boardroom of the Valley, like, different, the concourse at Reading, at like freezing cold.
That was terrible.
I was like in I was like in a janitor's cupboard with Mason Bennett getting
oh my God.
Yeah, literally.
The dream. Career peaked right there.
It was so weird, wasn't it, when you actually think back to that time? Seems like so long ago now, but yeah.
It's nice to hear that the coaches did a full day's work once and did 25,000 steps. In sports science, we call that the warm-up. That's fine, Matt, across all of those clubs, and obviously lots of different managers, like completely different training philosophies, are all quite the same? Was there one that you particularly liked? Again, you don't have to, you pass comment how you want, but was there a way of training? Have you seen training changed in the 10, 15 years that you were in the top of the game?
I've seen, obviously, like, you've seen the way the game's played. It's become sort of fashionable to play a certain way as kind of the years have rolled on. I think the influence of like Pep and like Klopp and the modern Premier League managers, football's obviously going a certain way. It's going a bit younger maybe, and the way that teams like to play out from the back, that's certainly evolved from when I started. Certainly Oldham, even Leeds, we're a lot more back to front. Whereas I think probably the one who was a bit of a trailblazer, to be honest with you, was Slavisa Jokanovic when I went to Fulham. He was probably ahead of his time, I think. He was sort of doing things that a lot of modern-day managers are doing now, but he was doing it back in 2016, 15, 16. He was one that actually now, looking back, I think, wow, okay, he probably brought those ideas to the Championship maybe a bit sooner than the other guys were. He was a really good coach. I thought he was brilliant. Cold in terms of his kind of personality and his outlook. He was, kind of emotionless in a lot of ways. Had like a real dry sense of humour, but he was a lovely guy, but a really really good coach. And I think if you remember back to that time, Fulham were probably the team that had a way of playing and a real brand of football that's so much more common now in certainly in the Championship, and obviously in the Premier League it's dime a dozen, but certainly in the Championship. But then, like had obviously, great coaches and managers since. Obviously, you Gaffer, not going to pump your tyres when I'm speaking to you, but obviously what I thought about you. But then, Steve McLaren, outstanding coach, like tremendous coach. And then obviously Ian Holloway, who I loved, completely different character. So yeah, to be honest with you, I've been very lucky. I've not really had anyone that I've found hard work or difficult, or I have been lucky in that sense. So, but yeah, I'd probably to describe something different, I'd probably say Jokanovic is kind of just being kind of ahead of his time, if that makes sense.
They had a great spell, didn't they? I mean, they knocked us out of the playoffs when we
Yep.
were at Derby. And it was ironic, actually, when you look back, because he had such a specific style, but then actually bringing in someone like a Mitrovic to actually bypass that pressure and bypass the way that teams would try and then stop them was quite crucial to them, wasn't it? And I think we spoke about it quite a lot, but actually, if you look at the Championship then, it's amazing how the game changes, isn't it? Because you had probably 2 or 3 teams trying to play that way. And then I would say at the start of last season was probably the first time I really sat up and thought, wow, like nearly every team in the Championship was trying to play like a Jokanovic. Of course, they can't all be that successful, but it felt there were less variation in style, less variation in the way teams played. Do you think that's made it harder for someone like you, Matt, as a target man? Do you think that's the sort of position that, in the Championship now, are we going to see that again? Do you think that's a dying art, a dying breed?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, I think certainly off the ball, my position, my style of play, it becomes quite hard to maintain myself in a side when you don't offer a lot of mobility and ability to press from the front, because so much is required off the number 9. Off the ball now, so it's almost its own skill set is how you perform. When we were doing our pre-match now, half the meetings based off what you're doing off the ball, as opposed to whereas in years gone by we would always really focus about what you were doing on the ball, and then you'd have like a basic shape off it that wasn't. But now it's like it's spoken about in such a different way. So yeah, certainly from that respect, my position becomes really difficult to maintain when you are required to do so much more off the ball now. On the ball, it's a difficult one because the teams, but now when you see with like the inverted wingers and the 3 in the middle and the sort of fullbacks playing high and the centre back split, I don't think the number 9 really gets involved in the build up that much nowadays. Like, I think he's just kind of there to get on the end of things in the box. Like, I see so many times where I feel like the 9 is almost a bit redundant for large spells of the game. But yeah, certainly I think so much more is kind of required off the number 9 nowadays, more than just being a physical presence. You kind of have to have a bit of everything, and I think everyone's looking for that now, someone who has a bit of a physical presence, who can stretch a defence in behind. So it is, it's become probably harder and harder as years gone by to find a manager who's quite happy playing with a sort of old-fashioned 9.
Well, mate, listen, when it comes to getting into the box and getting on the end of things, very few players have scored 5 career hat-tricks. At least that's my research. You might tell me it's 6 or 7, but to score 5 and to score 4 in one game, mate, that's outstanding. What's the secret to bagging hat-tricks then? What's the Matt Smith secret?
My I don't know about scoring hat-tricks, but I think just my thing has always been repetition. You would have probably seen me at Millwall in terms of like training. I would always stay after with either with ads or with you guys, and I would be doing like the most monotonous finishing drills, but it was just always about just having the rhythm of hitting the net all the time, even if it was from like 6 or 7 yards with like a young lad in goal. That was always kind of my thing, was like just feeling like just get as many finishes off as you can from Monday to Friday, and then you turn into autopilot come Saturday. That was always kind of my thing with finishing, was just get as many shots off as you can, just keep hitting the back of the net. feel comfortable that when the ball's coming into you, you're going to hit the back of the net, so that when Saturday and Tuesday rolls round, it's just you don't even ever think about it; it just happens. But that was always kind of my approach.
I think also as well, it's such an undervalued skill, isn't it? You know what you had, because you had so much more to your game, I think, than people maybe think about you, and they think about the aerial presence. But you know, for me, you're intelligent. You knew how to position yourself. You knew how to bring other people into the game. You know what I mean? So you know, it wasn't just about that, but to be able to, you know, direct play, to direct a pass coming at 60 meters with spin on at an angle and direct a header into someone's path, an on-rushing midfielder, or, you know, a cross in the box, Matt. And the amount of times I've looked at it and the cross is coming in, and I'll be really honest, I think you're the only player I've ever felt this with. I just thought goal. Straight away, goal. Whereas most players, I'd be thinking, I hope they can direct it on target, or I hope they can. With you, I just think goal, because you had such an accuracy with your finishing, you know, not just with your feet, but in the air in particular. You know, was that something you just felt at an early age? Was that something you had? You said you had to work on it, but was that an innate skill that you noticed?
Loads of practice. That was like a lot of practice. I think crossing and finishing was always something I did with my dad from like an early age. We just did so much repetition on that, and then I think 18 to 21 I was really finding my body. I wasn't 6'6", so it took me a while. I had a big growth spurt later on, and when I found my body, I kind of just repetition, practice, and then through scoring a lot of goals, in like you say, you just get confident with it. And it was at a point kind of at the sort of peak of my career where I would always feel like, just give me one half decent cross and I'm going to score. Like that was all I was. Some of the games where you don't have a lot of the ball, or you know you're not involved in the game, I would always think to myself, well, if I get one somewhat decent cross, I've got a good chance of scoring here. And I kind of always felt like that, which was always kind of like a bit of a secret weapon, because there'd be games where I wouldn't have the best of games, but I could sort of get myself out of jail a little bit with just a header from kind of nowhere. Do you know what I mean? That wasn't really, had no real right of scoring, but it was always kind of the weapon that I always had, I guess.
Now, when you're at Bristol City, you've got Steve Cotterill as the manager, and obviously everyone who knows Steve knows that he's a man of many words. But in an interview after your game against Gillingham, when you scored 4, he was lost for words, describing, I think, 3 of the goals that you scored that night as marvellous. And we try and get that piece of video, because he described the first one that was just marvellous, and the third one was marvellous. You could have won your own goal of the season competition in 1, 2, and 3 with that hat-trick alone. What happened that night?
No idea. It was just like, like I said, scored probably like 3 of the best goals I've ever scored in my life, I think, just on one night. You just have a bit like the City ground that night. You just have things where just everything clicks for you. You know, you'll know it as a manager when your team goes out and just everything comes off. And you have those nights in football, and you just got to be grateful for them, because they don't come around all too often. But just for whatever reason, it was a Tuesday night, windy, miserable one in Gillingham, but it just all seemed to click. But that's just football, isn't it? You got to hang on to those moments and try and gather momentum off them, for sure. But definitely scored a back heel, which I don't think I've ever even attempted, let alone scored. So it's it just shows you what was happening.
I'm praying the footage exists that we can insert somewhere into the promo.
There'll be a YouTube clip somewhere. Don't worry, you can add it. You can add it in.
Hang that one in the Louvre, a Matt Smith back heel goal. Come on.
I've seen plenty in training. We've seen plenty in training. Don't be so modest. So Dave mentions Steve Cotterill, and of course you worked under a lot of different managers, a lot of different personalities, and we spoke about sort of training style before. But one thing that really intrigued me, and I actually think that, again, I'm not saying this because you're on Smudge, but I actually think you made me a better manager. I think you challenged me in a different way. So I'm going to take you back to some of those conversations, not necessarily just with me, but when you get that call from someone like Dave, the gaffer wants to see you, and you're walking up, and maybe you feel like you're not going to start the next game. How would you prepare for that? How would you approach that? Because in a nice way, some of those conversations were pretty challenging, because a lot of players just accept it. A lot of players just go up, they'll be a bit angry. You can see it in the body language. They'll walk straight out. You would have a conversation. You would actually fight your corner, and you would try to get some reasoning. So what was your approach to those combos?
I think you'd always just try and, obviously you do want to fight your corner. Ultimately, I think everything came from a place of personal pride. I wanted to play. So it was, I would never, it was twofold. One, I wanted to play, but also I didn't want to convey to you that I was happy not playing. So that it was those two things that I wanted to kind of, for my own personal pride, to make you aware that I think I should be playing, but also I want to make you aware that I'm not happy just sitting on the bench doing nothing. Like, I've played with plenty of players in my career that were kind of not that arsed if they were playing or not playing, to be blunt. But that was never me. And there were times when I could fully understand the decision-making process. We might be playing a really possession-based team, away from home, and you think maybe this isn't the game for me. The one thing I would always say is it was challenging for you, but it was also not challenging for me. But you always went about things in a very respectful way, and you kind of matched my logic with your logic, and you were really brutally honest, which as a player I think is like it is a good thing to have, is when you've got someone who can just be really respectful and really honest with you, and there's nothing I can say. I can fight my corner, and you can match that with honesty, and I ultimately respect it. I'd rather hear that than someone blow smoke or say things that aren't true. Do you know what I mean? Because as a player, you might not think it as a manager, but as a player you can really see through that, or I could, certainly from having a lot of those conversations over the years. So no, obviously there were times when maybe I'd scored or I'd done well and I felt like, I'd scored more maybe than the lad you're bringing in, or I'd done better. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of would fight my corner in that respect. But I think I could always ultimately understand the logic behind it. I think the hardest thing for me, and that was and now when I'm older, I can look back, I can understand in year two, you obviously changed the dynamic of the team. We had Bennick, we had a lot of pace, and we tried to play a bit more. We played a lot more five at the back and a lot more counter-attacking football. I can understand that I don't really have a place in that type of team. So that then the conversations became tougher, because there was obviously frustration on my part, who felt that I could offer a lot more than what I was offering. But there was also an understanding on my part that, I'm not going to be the type of striker that's really going to thrive in this team. Do you know what I mean? So that was always kind of my thought process was, just try to prove to you that I care, and try and say something that's going to maybe change your thought process. But invariably, I know 9 times out of 10 that's not the case.
No, but I think it does. I think it's good as a manager, because I think you learn a lot of those sort of dealings with players. And it's quite interesting as a manager. It's almost, there's times when it's almost conflict resolution. And I think you can take that into any sort of business, any environment. The amount of different situations you have where someone wants one thing, and you can't not want another, but you've got to try and find some sort of win-win. You go back to like the Stephen Covey stuff. I'm sure you've come across it in business, where it's kind of like, you've got to try and find a way to get what you want as a manager, but make the other person go away feeling positive and still feeling part of it. It's actually a real challenge at times, and particularly when someone who, I think that was a challenge I found, is because I knew you were intelligent, and I'm not bemoaning some of the other lads, but because I knew that I couldn't just say something to you and get you out a bit, because you would challenge it, because I knew it had to be accurate and it had to be right. And there was a few times I think you said a few things, and I actually, really interesting, because I went away and I actually looked at the stats and I thought, you know what, he's right. And it was brilliant for me. It was brilliant for me, because actually you go, okay, well, now I have to know. If I'm going to tell a player that he's not playing, I have to at least give him a reason. So yes, I think you learn a lot of things, don't you?
Yeah, I think a lot of the thing that I always kind of would support me, I suppose, was wherever I played, my sort of like goals to minute would always be pretty high. So I kind of always had that in my arsenal to be able to say, well, listen, when I play, I'm scoring. Do you know what I mean? But I think, you can manipulate data in loads of different ways. That I could have drawn a real indifferent picture of myself in terms of my physical output and like kind of what I offer the team in this respect. And I couldn't argue with that. Do you know what I mean? It's fact. I think the things I always used to draw on would be like data that really impacted the game. So goals and assists and chances created, or, how many clearances out of the box, or for things that I thought were really, really impactful. But obviously, there's loads of different things, ingredients as to why you win or lose games, and you can manipulate the data all you want. I think I was just always trying to find any sort of way to make it look like as though I should be playing. But I think you get a bit older, you get a bit wiser. That's the thing. I think you probably downplay the importance of exactly what you've said, is making sure the player goes away feeling valued. I think that is a really undervalued thing that managers maybe don't fully register, is that's so important, because a number of times I've seen other managers maybe have that type of conversation. The player comes back in, he's dejected, he's furious, he's this, he's that, whereas I felt you had a real measured way of speaking to people, that made them feel wanted and valued and part of the squad, which I think that's a big reason also why we had such a good squad at Millwall, is because everyone felt that way. Even the lads that were on the bench felt like they were a part of it, and they were only one, bad game or one injury away from being able to come in and impact, and that their manager really believed in them regardless. Do you know what I mean? Which I think gets lost on a few, to be honest with you. It's not always been the type of conversations I've had with managers over the years. So I think it's definitely something that can be downplayed, for sure, the importance of that.
Do you think that being data informed as such as a player is important? We've seen Kevin De Bruyne using his knowledge of his statistics and his data and his kind of the more advanced information and analysis that we have nowadays in order to be able to have that conversation with whether it's a head coach or a sporting director, to actually say, this is my value to the team. That actually it's more than just maybe a feeling or a hunch that a manager might have. And actually that's putting pressure on both ends, both the players to know actually if they're contributing at the level of expectation, but also for the management and higher ups at clubs to understand that this information is also in the hands of the players.
I'm probably of the belief that you guys is it kind of has to be used in a balanced way. It has to be measured against kind of what you see with the naked eye, how you feel. As much as football is, a science in many ways, it's also an art in many ways, and I think you kind of do have to trade the two off and kind of use the data to inform, but not necessarily dictate. It can be such a useful tool in so many ways with injury prevention and giving you a barometer of loads of different sort of things that happen throughout a game. But ultimately, I don't think you can discount a feeling, what you see with your eye, how you balance that off with experience in different scenarios. I don't think the science necessarily, navigates your way through all of those different things. I think you do have to have a healthy trade-off between the two. And you do see some clubs where they go full science and, it becomes a bit robotic and a bit sterile. I think you have to have an environment where there's a blend of both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an industry of people, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Again, I push this on every time I talk to different people that might be able to trying to sell us these sort of software programs in a data, and they say that's incredible, and we want to have as much objective data as possible to support our feeling, our right, but you can never get away from its people, and if you're dealing with people, then all of those human traits and the way people feel and the way people are motivated are probably more important, aren't they? I'm sure you must be now looking at that within the business world as well.
For sure, yeah. I mean, we obviously deal a lot with, tech investments now with sports people. We get sent a lot of sports tech companies. So I've kind of been exposed to all sorts of different ones. And it does make yourself kind of from the position of a player, ask yourself, would I value, we got sent a deck of a company a couple of weeks ago, and they were I think they've got some contracts with some big Premier League teams now, but they kind of are putting in a chip in the shirts of players now. And that can use AI to analyze communication within a game. So then it can break down the way a player speaks, if he's speaking in a positive way, in a negative way, and it kind of gives you an analysis of their communication throughout a game. And I'm kind of sat there thinking, Christ, is that really valuable? Would a manager, because we are people at the end of the day. You would have met players that are quiet, are loud, are angry, are humble, and what works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. So it goes full circle, but back to exactly what you're saying is ultimately it is a people sport, and should we treat everyone with the same approach, and should we expect them to operate. Everyone's got their own sort of unique way of doing things. So things like that make me really think is something like that really valuable, and are we going like far too aggressively that in one direction, and making it a bit of a sterile sport when in fact it's a sport that's like filled with emotion and passion and people, and that's why we love it. Do you know what I mean? So it's an interesting debate for sure.
So, Matt, obviously with Sequel, which is the company you're involved with now, talk us through that. Was that always something that's kind of sat in the background all the way through your career? When you left the training ground, and you then obviously you've continued with your studies, but was this always a kind of a dual stream that was happening, your sporting career, but also your academic and future entrepreneurial career?
Yeah, so I'd started my MBA when I was at Millwall. I did that part time alongside playing, which was kind of always like just something to not necessarily occupy my time, but something to do productively whilst I was playing, because I thought it would steer me in some, not say they're the be all and end all, but like something that would, channel me towards something for when I finish. And then through that, I kind of see the idea of sequel like ideated probably about 2 years ago. And yeah, through sort of my network of kind of, like I said, I've been investing in tech for about 10 years now, and I've really enjoyed the process, and kind of my network of angels and entrepreneurs has kind of grown through that really. And then, yeah, a couple of guys I was close to at university have had really successful exits in their first companies, and we kind of all came together and kind of developed this platform for elite sports people to be able to essentially do what I've been doing for the past 10 years, which is invest in different tech companies. The good thing is what we try to gear ourselves towards is offering what we would consider elite opportunities. So we kind of only partner with top tier funds, and they share their deals with us, and we share it with the athletes. So they're kind of exposed to maybe a caliber of deals that I probably haven't been exposed to for 10 years. But I think we're able to leverage the power of who we're dealing with. We've got a lot of guys in the Premier League and the NBA and the NFL, some boxers and golfers you would have obviously heard of. So it's, the power of the community is kind of what's given us access to these guys in America. I mean, they're predominantly in the Bay Area in San Francisco. So I've really enjoyed building that out for sure. Very, very different to obviously everything I've been doing with football. Obviously the similar network, it's sport, but very different day to day. I'm going to be honest with you, but it's still, it's it's like anything. I think I'm just getting used to it as well. We're doing it full time for like a month, part time for 18 months, let's say. So yeah, just kind of finding my feet with it already. But I kind of knew early that management coaching wouldn't be my route. So yeah, kind of always thought, what would I do? And I've enjoyed this. It's been good. And like I said, I'm kind of happy with who I'm doing it with. I think always when you kind of, I like to position myself as the dumbest guy in the room by a long way. So I think you're always in a good room when that's the case. So yeah, I really feel grateful for who I'm doing it with, I guess.
Have you found that transition, Matt? Because I found that very different. But going from a player, everyone spoke and said, playing, there's nothing better than playing. But I actually found as a manager that it fitted a lot of the things that I missed in some ways with playing. So, there was a far bigger challenge mentally. There was like cognitively, there was just so many different obstacles to get. So it tested you in so many different ways. Have you found that full time in your business? Have you enjoyed that side of it?
I have enjoyed it. I think there's certain days where I feel like I'm flying, I'm doing great, and there's other days where I don't feel like that. And yeah, I think the kind of big change I've adapted to quite well is probably more the smaller changes that I find probably the hardest to process, is like working in an office, working long hours. Like I'm now with 10 tech guys in my team as opposed to like 25 childish alpha males. Like it's a very, I think those smaller changes are probably the bigger things, if that makes sense. But in terms of brain capacity, I guess I've end the day a bit more frazzled mentally than I probably ever have been. So yeah, I think that will come with time, getting used to it. Like I said, I'm 4 weeks in, let's say, so it's been steady transition. But everyone in the team that I'm working with kind of knows that this is my first kind of like pivot away from football. So they've all been brilliant with me. We've got like a full-time team of 12, and they're all good people. So they all kind of know where I've been and where I'm going. So that makes it easier.
Can't you just employ Coops and Benno? Can you not just
That's
employ
what I mean.
Coops and Benno
just to keep them around,
so it's not so big a transition?
Yeah, I might have to. Give it another month. We'll see how we go.
Yeah, you must miss dodging sellotape booby traps that are being set up in dressing rooms to try and get a fine out of you.
I tell you what, it's only when you leave it do you then realise, like, wowzers, like, yeah, that is just, it was such a, you don't find that in any other walk of life. Do you know what I mean? We're like 20, 30 something year olds, like, doing all these different things on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, it's unique environment for sure. For sure.
Yeah, it's got to be different. Look,
I don't think I'll be replicating that anytime soon. Yeah, for sure.
Looking at potentially a multi-million-pound deal sheet versus whose job is it to bring the shower gel for the
slightly different.
Set you up well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So we mentioned data earlier on. So I'm just going to go back through some rough data. So 560 odd games, Matt, 160 goals. I'm sure there were more than that. Supporters Player of the Year last season, Players Player of the Year last season at Salford, and an incredible season. So is this it from a football perspective? You brilliantly got out of pre-season, firstly, and secondly, is this? Do you think this is it, or do you think you're still something that might tempt you out?
If being brutally honest, I think this is it. I haven't announced my retirement yet, and I've kind of had 5 or 6 kind of loose offers from similar-ish type offers that I had at Salford to stay for another year. I think with what I'm trying to balance off, maybe the next 10 years against the next 10 months, and I'm trying to look a bit longer term, which is probably why I am here where I am right now, in an office and not on a pitch somewhere. But listen, never say never. But yeah, like I said, I'm kind of slowly but surely getting around to the fact that this might be it. So definitely, it was always my intention to sort of leave on my own terms with my head held high. So I kind of feel like I'm in that position now. But yeah, I guess time will tell. But definitely navigated pre-season well. The one thing I've had about 5 or 6 managers to ask me if they, want to come in or whatever. I've not told them that the last time I went for a run was the last game of last season. They might rethink their decision. Yeah, I probably need another month to get back to some sort of fitness, but yeah,
somebody will need somebody in about 6 weeks, mate, and they won't care if you haven't run in the last 10 years. They come in and stick that round thing in that net, and that would be good enough for them.
Yeah, no, exactly. So we'll see.
Well, Matt, it's been fascinating talking to you. I mean, the next period of your career, it's all in front of you, and we wish you every success with it. And we look forward to seeing how Sequel does. And just thank you immensely for joining us on Breaking Lines with Matt Smith.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, guys.